Welcome back, people, to Layer 1. We are once again here, but at what cost? A new episode, surprisingly. We do have a
Hey,
bit of a thematic follow up to the last one in some
yes,
sense.
yes. The you could call this the second episode in our American Shintoism series. Is what we're going with.
Yes, exactly. A
What we're
great
going with.
little concept you've come up with there.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And then
Uh,
I guess we'll touch on a few things in terms of, say, like locations or things. We'll,
yeah,
we'll get to it, but like a kind of top of the crown jewel of this episode would be the Ong's hat, as a lot of good old internet people know. One of the potentially first ARGs to be out there on the wired.
yeah. So Ongsat is it's a first in oh so many ways. It's really the cornerstone of I think what we would call unfiction today.
Mhm.
Shout out to my boy Nightmind for that one. And basically, Ong's hat is created by this guy named Joseph Matheny, who is this kind of like old school, like early Silicon Valley era hippie counterculture guy who wanted to. He liked what at the time was called transmedia storytelling. It's still called that among like academics, but like that's cringe. Unfiction sounds so much better. Um, um, and so basically, this guy, he's always been kind of fucking around with mediums to tell stories. Like he's a big storyteller, big. Um, this storyteller guy who loves different like experimenting with media, but also is very interested in the fringe, or at least was interested in the kind of fringes of society, conspiracy theory, weird subcultures, drug use, early internet subculture. I think he at one point said that he later on was inspired by the book Siberia, which, if you know what that is, it's a Douglas Rushkoff, this kind of media theorist guy, kind of looks into. In this book, he looks into kind of internet subculture, the subculture around technology, drugs, and the emerging internet at the time. This was back in the early 90s. And so that's a lot of stuff that this guy, Joseph Matheny, was into. And Joseph Matheny, again, into fringe, weird stuff. And he comes out of a kind of prankster mindset. Anyone who knows about, like, Church of the Subgenius, Discordianism, all that jazz, this guy, he comes straight out of those movements, I guess you could say. And so the story of Ong's hat is this. It's so fascinating because, again, it's a first in so many ways. It does a lot of things at once that later things do individually. So it's this weird kind of melting pot of ARG, unfiction kind of series that you might see on YouTube or on Twitter these days. So back then, this all starts. It actually starts pre-internet. So it's older than the internet. People don't realize that it started. It goes back as the '80s, That's how far back the Ong's Hat. He started kind of doing all this Ong's Hat stuff. Back on bulletin board systems. If anyone knows what those are, real ones will know. Bulletin boards. They're kind of proto internet systems that you would dial up into. And they were bulletin board systems were also kind of a melting pot of in things that would pop up on the internet individually. You could play games on bulletin boards. You could message board. You had message boards, and you could also, on some, even live chat. Blog, all this stuff. Um, so let's start it back on bulletin board systems. Um, he would Xerox pamphlets and send them to like fringe, BBS news boards. Try to get his stuff in like weird fringe zines, or send them into like paranormal conspiracy stuff. All those old paranormal conspiracy guys, and with the aim to, of course, create this fictional storyline. Which, to get into the story of Ong's Hat, is this crazy, again, also kind of ahead of its time, because it's all about all this weird quantum physics, chaos theory, conspiracy stuff. It's about a group of renegade Princeton professors, the Dobbs twins, which, again, that's a hint towards the meme of it all. The memery of it all is because anyone who knows Church of the Subgenius knows our Lord and Savior Bob Dobbs. So there's a little hint being thrown in by Joseph Matheny. And so the Dobbs twins are these Princeton professors who are all into like chaos theory and they in quantum bullshit, and they claim to make big breakthroughs in chaos magic, and this is seen as heretical by academia and gets them kicked out because how dare you, chaos magic, interdimensional travel, what are you talking about? And so they meet up with some other kind of wacky mystic people, and they found the Moorish science ashram. The leader of the group of mystics they find buys 200 acres of forest in the Pine Barrens in New Jersey. This abandoned town named called Ong's Hat. And Ong's Hat is a real place too. Is the thing. So you get this interesting dynamic in the story where you get, again, hints to obvious like fakery with the Dobbs twins. But then Ong's Hat is a very real place. It's a real abandoned town in the Pine Barrens. It's kind of this mysterious place. There's a million stories as to why it's called Ong's Hat. As far as I've been able to find, there was never been any official reason why it was abandoned. So there's this mystique to it. And okay, so this all supposedly happened in the late 70s. So these chaos scientists and these wayward mystics are doing their experiments in spirituality, politics, tantric sex, because of course psychopharmacology and all this quantum chaos mumbo jumbo. And they end up creating a device called the egg. The egg is basically a sensory deprivation device. But through all this weird quantum chaos mumbo jumbo, they're trying to get it to hop, initially they're not trying to hop through dimensions. Initially, they're trying to use the device to observe the wave function collapse, which that's a whole thing in quantum physics that would honestly kind of require an episode of its own. So we won't get into the wave function collapse and all the stuff all the controversy to this day in science of what that means and is. But they want to observe that using this egg device. And so as they're testing it one day, they find that it can send you to other dimensions. That you, through ostensibly riding the wave function collapse, you get pushed into another dimension. And so they start doing, of course, once you find out you can dimension hop, you're going to start testing that out, seeing what you can do, where you can go. And what ends up happening is they find this alternate Earth, which is exactly the same as our Earth, with the sole exception that human life doesn't exist. And so that kind of becomes like a secondary base for them, because it's just this perfect place. It's Earth, but there's no other people to fuck with you. And then, of course, however, as they're continuing their experiments, the military finds out about this, and they want a piece of that dimension hopping action. And so they threaten the researchers. And they come in, they raid their Ong's Hat base, and the survivors basically fuck off permanently to this other dimension, and take their technology with them. And all that's left behind is basically the foundation of their little base, and that's it. And so supposedly, to this day, the people of the ashram return occasionally to our dimension to restock on supplies, but that's ostensibly where the story ends in terms of that whole main story there. But of course, it's this ARG-esque unfiction story, so it picks up with the very telling of the story. So Joseph Matheny and his buds, again, they Xerox copied this pamphlet, this zine that's supposedly from the ashram itself, called Ong's Hat: Gateway to the Dimensions. I think you can find that still online. And it's basically like a little info brochure that the ashram sets up that is so it's basically like a little, it's telling pretty much all of this. It's telling their little story, telling you what all this is about. But what made this interesting is that it was a lot of the times they would send it to people. They would have they would sometimes leave it around in some places. I hear they once stuffed a bunch in like the park ranger, like when you go to like a state park or something, there's like the little area in the ranger office where there's all the brochures and pamphlets. Apparently stuffed they stuffed them there in the Pine Barrens ranger office or something.
A great idea, just in general for future
um, and but mainly they would send it to other people, and like conspiracy theorists, paranormal investigators, see who would bite, and more importantly, see who would scan it and upload it onto their own websites or whatever. Send it out to their own followers and get it spread out even more. But it would paint itself as like, ooh, you've gotten close to the truth. If you're reading this, it's because you've gotten close, and we're reaching out to tell you the truth because we think you're special. You're someone who's a truth seeker. It had that kind of language, to really bait in people. Like, oh, this crazy like chaos science institute from another dimension. It, it's very um it reminds me of the Sam Hyde bit, you know, the Moorish science ashram chose me, you know.
Ah, yes. It really did, though, by the way. Yeah, it did.
Yeah, exactly. They use that kind of psychology to get people. And then of course you get the other document that's big to the story, the Incanabula. Um, Also known as Incanabula, a catalog of rare books, manuscripts, and curiosa, conspiracy theory, frontier science, and alternative worlds. Um, Quite a title. And the Incanabula is this index of exactly what it says. It's recommended reading essentially for this interdimensional Ong's hat magic chaos stuff. Um, and what's again fascinating about this is that it has real books in it. There's real books in the catalog that you can actually find and read. You know, a lot of actual works of science, quantum physics, um, chaos theory. You can find real books on chaos magic and Ong's hat as an actual physical place. Um, and a lot of this stuff is also completely fake. There's a lot of titles in there that are just completely made up by Joseph Matheny and his friends that hint at other stuff in this universe they're creating. Um, and you you get this, so it creates this kind of atmosphere of, especially back then, I imagine, you know, this is the 90s, early internet stuff. You know, you read this Incanabula, this catalog, and you when you go to your local library, or you know, you look it up in what limited fashion you could back then, you find, well, some of these books are real, so maybe these other books are also real, and there's actually, you know, all this research out there that's just hidden. It's, you have to dive deeper. You know, maybe these books are just not cataloged properly anywhere else. You know, maybe there's these. Maybe it's in some library somewhere that no one knows about. Um, it's not properly cataloged or something, and you know, that makes sense, especially for back then. I think, I'm not, you know, I'm not really old enough to have been there for the whole Ongsat thing myself. Um, but I do remember. I'm old enough to kind of still vaguely remember the analog age, just a little bit, of analog being more prevalent than digital. Um, and like it's very believable that yes, this catalog of books, the ones you can't find, well, you have verifiably real ones, and the ones you can't find, well, maybe there's perfectly reasonable explanations for that still have them being real. Um, you know, I'm sure there's plenty of books that you can't find on the internet, even today, that are probably rotting away on some bookshelf in some underfunded library somewhere. You know?
Oh, yeah,
Or,
totally.
I know for a fact that there's plenty of movies that, you know, had VHS releases, but never had a DVD release, never had, and that's never were transferred to the internet either. You know, you just, I think, to those who watch a nice, pretty solid YouTuber, I'm a fan of Brandon Tenold, who does, you know, B movie reviews. I think, if I remember correctly, before he found a copy of Dog Soldiers and like uploaded it himself so that he could have footage for his video on it, it wasn't anywhere online. Like, he just had to do it himself. So the these situations totally exist where there's so many pieces of media that never made the jump to, even to this day, from analog to digital. And so that's, I imagine in the 90s that was even more the case. So it was totally believable that, well, maybe these are just not logged on the internet and I just can't happen to find it at my library or bookstore, but maybe it's out there somewhere. And so the the story of Ong's Hat spreads throughout the internet throughout the 90s. And it kind of becomes, so I've probably done a not too great job at summarizing the story so far, but that's fine because there's plenty of solid videos on the Ong's Hat story on YouTube that you can find, or internet pages on it. This is just kind of to get a basic quick rundown on Ong's Hat
Yeah.
as a story. But so what ends up happening throughout the decade is, even though you have, again, clear hints, and at first it does appear to have garnered an audience of people, in the know. They get it. They get
Yeah.
what this is. They get what it's about. They also come from this kind of Church of the Subgenius, Discordianism kind of substrate, and they get it. There's pictures of like members of the ashram, and it's just screenshots of like the Brady Bunch or some shit. But of course, what ends up happening is he's sending these in to real conspiracy theorists, to real paranormal investigators who, this is serious business for them. He eventually starts cultivating an audience of, what we would call internet schizos today. And they, you know, a lot, it's, again, these are the same kind of people who fell for like Q, you know. And so they see all this stuff, and the internet's new to them still. you know it's still this thing where like a lot of people believe what they see on the internet. And it's, especially, there's so much effort put into this. There's the incanabula, there's the Ong's Hat Gateway to the Dimensions brochure. There's even Joseph Matheny even went as far as doing fake interviews with fake Ong's Hat ashram raid survivors. Um, he even goes as far as doing interviews with. He does an interview with Art Bell on Coast to Coast about this, completely in character, as if it's all real.
Always comes back to Art Bell. My God.
It always does. It always does.
Everything these days. It's just, it all points back to that Coast to Coast AM radio show.
It
And
it all it really does. It all goes back to Coast to Coast. It's all
uh,
Coast to Coast is gonna need its own episode one
it
of these
really
days.
is. There's so much.
There's so much. We're gonna have to do all the stuff revolving around it first, though. We need to do the alien call and John Teeter and
Yeah, and then
all.
of course Ong's Hat got in on there too, and it's like,
Of course.
oh man.
So he does this interview with Art Bell, and of course that's the big break. But it's also what really gets the schizos, eye on the whole project. So all these people who start who believe it's real. This is 100% legit. You know, Honestly, that's not even necessarily like a problem in and of itself. Except for the fact that Joseph Matheny doesn't really like this. To him, it's just a game, right? It's just an
Yeah.
ARG. It's just this little storytelling project using the internet that's never been done before. Of course, to these people, it's a lot more than that. It's this big old conspiracy. That's they've stumbled onto something important and secret, and the government's covering it up. Um, and it's just this big deal. Of course, what ends up happening is eventually he just gets kind of sick of it and just comes out and is like, all right, it's over. I'm done. Like, this is just a little cool transmedia storytelling project I had. I wanted to tell a cool story using the internet and all these other mediums entwined with it. It's fake. Go home.
Yeah.
Of course, the schizo conspiracy theorists, these proto Q boomers are like,
No,
they're paying
that's
you. They're making you say it.
yeah,
That's what
yeah, that's
that's
what I
what they want us
watched.
to think. Exactly. Exactly. And, eventually he starts getting serious schizos, you know, people like coming onto his property, trying to get into his home, camping out on his lawn and stuff, all bothering him, trying to get, the answers to Ong's hat. And yeah, I at that point, that's where it's really a problem, right? Like, it's one thing when people are just being weirdos on the internet. It's another thing when they're like stalking you. Like, they doxed this man. They doxed him. They like found
Yeah,
out where he lived. They found out where he worked. They called his employers and stuff. Like, it was rough. It was seriously rough. Um, and so sadly, the world's first ARG, first internet unfiction, um, it ends in a really unfortunate way. Um, but in a way, it's kind of fitting. Not because it ending in such a bad way is fitting, but because it ending that way means that it kind of never really ended.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
You have all the people who still believe. I'm sure there's so many out there who are just like, you know, Ong's hat is real. I'm gonna go to the ashram and find the egg.
Again, Joseph Matheny knew his conspiracy culture, so it has a lot of um, overlap with real world conspiracies that are that its proponents say is 100% completely real. Like, for instance, the Montauk Project or the Philadelphia Experiment. Like, those are real
Yeah,
conspiracies that people really believe in. That the people who started them, you know, swear to their dying breath, are 100% legit. Actually happened. And there's a lot. They're very similar stories to these conspiracies. And so, of course, if you can believe in Montauk Project, if you can believe in the Philadelphia Experiment, if you can believe in the Dulce Air Base conspiracies and all that stuff, like, Ong's hat is totally believable. Like, you probably believe it's already happened elsewhere before. Um, and so, the in a way, Ong's hat never ended because it took on a life of its own, and as much as Joseph Matheny wanted to kind of put an end to it, he really couldn't at that point. Um, and so, yeah, you still have people who 100% believe in the story of the Princeton scientists and the Moorish Science Ashram and um, Institute of Chaos Studies, this alternate dimension, the egg, all of it. Um, and now we're kind of getting into what we want to talk about, which is um, the concept of legend tripping, which is basically this. Legend tripping is basically a way, like it's anthropology speak for like a pilgrimage, basically, to a kind of sacred esque place. And so to this day, and you can find videos on YouTube. To this day, you get people who legend trip to Ong's Hat out in the Pine Barrens just to just to be there, just to go there in the hopes of maybe finding some ashram scientists popping up in the egg to get some supplies or something. But it's just to kind of be there, this place of mystic, or like pseudo science mystic significance. And you actually have the book Legend Tripping Online: Supernatural Folklore and the Search for Ong's Hat by one Michael Kinsella. Very nice little read that kind of goes into this. Um, not just the concept of legend tripping, but how it relates to Ong's Hat, um, and how the book's kind of focused a bit more on how the internet is affecting these concepts, and how that's why Ong's Hat is an important example of this, is because you know you've always had stuff like this in some sense. You have the Black Mailbox.
A very famous one. The, out on top of it just being, the mailbox itself, but the entire highway, it's like attached to the extraterrestrial highway. That whole stretch of road has become like this place for people, wanting to go to catch a sight of UFOs and leave little notes and stickers and things as you would like.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, making that little connection to Shinto and stuff, just like leaving little, I don't know, little notes or talismans at like shrines and things like that. It's honestly pretty similar.
Yeah. I think so. I watched this. This episode was inspired by a video by a YouTuber known as Unknown Territory. A video of his on the Black Mailbox, and I was watching this video, kind of in this after episode 5, kind of in this American Shintoism mindset. And at one point, he brings up a quote by one of these UFO researchers who said, "At one point, when I visited the mailbox, I saw that Mulder from the X-Files had signed it. So, it became a part of Area 51 folklore, and people would still gather there. It was almost like a shrine. It was almost like you had to visit the Black Mailbox or your mission is not complete." And so I just found that fascinating, um, because yeah, these places are almost like shrines. Whether it be interdimensional scientists or aliens, UFOs, and Men in Black. You have these locations in America and the rest of the West, really too, the world at large, even. But I think we're kind of trying to be specific here, because this is kind of a new thing in the West, in America, developing that I think is different from a lot of the traditional religious stuff. And that's kind of why we're talking about it, because like the quote said, it was almost like a shrine, but these aren't really shrines. You don't.
No, no one's going there to pray or anything, and just
Exactly. You're not praying at Ong's Hat. You're not praying at the mailbox, at the Black Mailbox, but it's still, you're making this pilgrimage. You're going here for reasons that are, it's not like you're going to a restaurant because you saw it on Instagram and you thought, the food looked cute and you wanted to take a picture and of your food in front of the cute little restaurant because everyone else is doing it. No, it's like a pseudo mystical thing. You're going there because, like the guy, again, like the quote said, you have to go there. It's like your mission is not complete in this life. Your mission in life is not complete if you don't go to these places. You don't go, like, can you call yourself a true ufologist if you don't go to the Black Mailbox? If you don't go to the gates of Area 51? If you don't go to that spot in Dulce where the base is? Um, if you don't go to the Denver airport and get a look at all the weird stuff there.
even as silly and kind of disappointing it ended up being, the fervor behind that Area 51 raid had like that energy to it of like, you know again, those types of people. We want to see UFOs. We go to the place where we've been told there could be, and it's just like, yeah, no, it's like a really interesting phenomena that's come out, and of course with the internet influencing it heavily now.
Yes. You get this again. That's what I think is fascinating about this kind of American Shinto theory is that you've had this developing for a while, but now it's really becoming entwined with and supercharged by the internet. You know, because now, um, you another thing that's kind of a part of this that I've talked to Koji about with is all the different to tie it even more with the last episode, all the cryptid festivals that have been popping up. You know, the most famous and biggest is obviously the Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant. But you're getting more now. You have just recently you had the first Frogman Festival in Loveland, Ohio. You know, I know there's a Lizard Man Festival in Bishopville where the Lizard Man sightings happened. There's the Hodag Festival in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. Um, there's numerous Bigfoot festivals across the states and probably in Canada too. Um,
Now, I haven't heard too much about like festivals or things, but I do know there's the biggest thing up in Canada, aside from Sasquatches, whatever, that's everywhere North America, but are equivalents to like the Loch Ness monster. There's a couple of them. There's the Ogopogo and there's the Igopogo, which are same thing, all big sea lizard seal creatures that were
right.
spotted ages ago. But at least in one of the locations, they have built a statue of the the lizard man, the big lake creature, and it's like,
Hmm.
oh, okay, so that's again, it's like, oh, there's a place to go now for
Yes.
if you're into that, like
Yeah.
make the trip to go see the funny statue of the creature.
Yeah. And you get that again in the Mothman Festival. They have the big old Mothman statue, smack dab in the middle of Point Pleasant. They actually have a Hodag statue in Rhinelander that you can go visit. You can go take a picture in front of the Hodag. I'm pretty sure there's Bigfoot statues across the states.
Oh yeah, plenty of those. The the Poplik monster and the bridge, like the railroad bridge
Yes. The
that people
bridge.
love to go to, and of course, plenty of YouTubers and stuff who will go there and do their funny old taunt the goat man ritual.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So there's plenty of examples of this. You go to the bridge. If you want to see the goat man, you there's these locations that like they're the spot. You have a lesser known American cryptid is the Lone Pine Mountain Devil. Only you can only find it, of course, in Lone Pine, California, specifically Lone Pine Mountain. There's one little mountain in California that's like it's the place where you find this weird demon creature. But yeah, so you have all this stuff that again are these pseudo sacred spots. They're places where you make these pilgrimages, you legend trip, and it's important in ways beyond just everyone's doing it because one, it's not really everyone doing it.
No.
Like it's you're going there because it has these stories associated with them about weird happenings, weird creatures, weird just weird stuff in general, that are unique to that spot. That's the story associated with it is unique. You can't find the Lone Pine Mountain Devil anywhere else. You can't find the Bishopville Lizard Man anywhere else. Um, you can't find, there's no other Ong's hat. you know, you get this kind of growing awareness from the internet that again kind of supercharges it. As I was saying, you've had the Mothman Festival for a while now, ever since like 2004. But when you think about it, that's still fairly recent.
Yeah.
Um, but you're getting more now. Just I think it was, what was it, last year? Yeah, I think it was just last year, maybe just this year actually, that you had the first Loveland Frog Festival. There was a Squonk Festival for the first time. Also, like, what, a squonk? Um, all these cryptids are getting their festivals now, and they're again, as we said in the last episode, they're almost like the yokai, this the genus loci of these places. It's kind of interesting and kind of exciting. I want to go to these. I've always
Oh
wanted to go to
yeah.
the Modfan Festival. Now that all these others are happening, I want to go to those too because that just sounds interesting. Um, but again, who's heard of a squonk before? Well, probably a lot of people now
Yeah.
because of the internet. But like before, like, you know, a lot of these things were just kind of local legend, local myth, and I bet to most people it was just, oh, it's that dumb story from like the 60s or whatever, maybe 1800s. Um it, it's I bet a lot of people treated it as like embarrassing old-timey stuff. But now it's like, oh, now it's selling point. And
Yeah.
I think especially that Mothman showed that these things can be selling points, to kind of liven up, tiny old towns. Um, but like it's still interesting that the internet is part of what's helping this. It's part of what's making people aware of, all these weird obscure cryptids. Like, without the internet, I bet most people wouldn't have heard of the Grafton Monster or the Vegetable Man or the Van Meter Visitor. All these weird little sightings in nowhere America. Um, you definitely wouldn't have Ong's hat and the story surrounding it without the internet for sure.
Yeah, no, not at all. That'd be a way more localized thing if that were to, you know, stuck to a small group of people in New Jersey who had those pamphlets and were just like, huh, that's strange.
That's weird.
Fades into the past as many of those things do. But then
Yes.
all these things got digitized and all these stories got carried over from like old newspaper reports and stuff that got, you know, kept or
Well,
archived and all these things. And people are just like, there's lots of little stories everywhere from past century of all these strange little encounters with creatures or whatever.
and the fascinating thing about all this too is that, as Michael Kinsella finds in his legend tripping book, it's kind of a like self-fueling loop. Because what he ended up finding, and this book was from about a decade ago, I think, a little over a decade ago actually. Um, what he ended up finding was that the story of Ong's hat, even though it's fairly obscure, even by today, it's fairly obscure on the internet. Not many people, if we talk about like Ong's hat and the egg, though you still get references here and there. Anyone who has seen anything, any conspiracy iceberg, you'll see casual reference to eggless travel. So it's still there, kind of in the collective subconscious. There's still someone out there who remembers Ong's hat, and had enough thought to put a little egg reference in a conspiracy iceberg. Um, but for the most part, it's still fairly obscure. Um, and but what he ended up finding was that it's this internet story that, except for a couple brochures being stuffed into a Rangers brochure box or whatever, it made its way into the local folklore, into the local kind of mythos. So now you get, it's not just people from the internet who come and do legend tripping, at Ong's Hat. You get like local kids, teenagers who hear the story about the crazy scientists who found a way to tear a hole in the dimensions, and you get told, hey, let's go spend a night at Ong's Hat, see if we can find the ashram, you know. And people will talk about, oh yeah, I think I've heard of that, yeah. Yeah. And so it's interesting to see how, again, the internet is also, it's not just fueling this, but it's not just, again, it's this loop, you know. Another example of this that's kind of different is the Mothman Chicago sightings. Would those be happening if people didn't become aware of the Mothman through the internet?
Exactly.
Like, like,
Man, that just goes down a whole other rabbit hole. Is this implying that the internet is assisting in the creation of tulpas?
that's been a theory for a while now, actually. Um, if anyone who remembers the heyday of Slenderman remembers Tulpa theory, um, real ones will know. Um,
Man,
um, but yeah, so that's a nice little question to have. It kind of, it's almost like it gives me like Serial Experiments Lane vibes, where it's just like, would in the same vein as, would Lane become this, you know, big deal without the internet? Would she have just been this normal middle schooler instead of, God of the Wired? In the same vein, you kind of gotta ask, like, would a bunch of Chicago people, like, really, without the internet, would they even know enough about the Mothman to be able to call what they saw the Mothman?
right, exactly.
Like, include it as part of the mythos. That's, we're in this kind of new world in regards to that, and I think people people are kind of more becoming aware of this, if not consciously, subconsciously, because one of the other things I feel this really ties into, actually, is the prevalence in, the internet's public consciousness of liminal spaces. Um, because I think liminal spaces are really, it, if there was any word or phrase I would use for that I could call all these different, you know shrines or sacred places of American Shinto, I would call them liminal spaces, because that's what they all are. I mean, what is more liminal than seeing a random mailbox in the middle of the desert, or an abandoned old town that has no one living in it, or an abandoned TNT factory where the Mothman is supposed to reside? These are all these places, that are kind of these pseudo sacred places to all these weird paranormal stories and supposed events, are they're liminal spaces. That's what they are. And I think people are kind of increasingly catching on that, the the weird vibes of these spaces. Yes, they have the weird vibes, but in terms of the American consciousness, or even just Western in general consciousness, there's something more to them. There's almost like a spiritual side to things, like a paranormal side to things. And I think that's why you get, the liminal space aesthetic also developed into like weirdcore and dreamcore, where you get all this weird stuff going on in these liminal space pictures. Because I mean, you have, there's just something these places act as you really do feel, like an Ong's hat, like you're gonna find yourself in another dimension by being in this space. That's what you really feel like. And you feel like maybe something from another dimension is gonna come and find you,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and with that, it's like it triggers all these, a lot of those you hear about them. They trigger those some sort of emotion, some sort of response from people of like, oh, people will feel loneliness or nostalgia, or there'll be people who feel fear or just kind of like wonder about these places. And a good point, yeah, it's been, of course, the classic your liminal spaces. You immediately think of the back rooms, but that picture, like the effort online of people trying to find where that came from, because if they find that location, people are gonna go there because it like
Oh yeah, of
immediately,
course.
if it still exists, obviously that could just be
Yes,
completely demolished or remodeled. But
big if, yes.
yeah, but if somewhere there's some old little abandoned office building that has that silly yellow wallpaper and gross carpet and stuff, people will go there because they're like, you know just how big the backrooms exploded, and it's like that will be their, like, that group of people, that'll be their little shrine, their little
Yeah,
pilgrimage
of
to,
course.
to the real backrooms.
And I think all of this is why the back rooms took off so much, because it's the perfect encapsulation of everything we've been talking about so far. It's this otherworldly space that looks exactly like these real world spaces that give off this energy that's just a bit off, that you really do feel like you could slip into another world, or something from another world could slip into ours. You end up with people who, I mean, it's a really great aesthetic for one. I don't, like, people like it. I like it. It's really good. It's really interesting. It really does. There is this like nostalgic kind of throwback vibe to it all, and it really reminds me that, you know since the dawn of time, all these sacred spaces in like actual real world mythologies and religions and belief systems are they're not liminal spaces in the way, we talk about them today, when they're not man-made. Well, even then sometimes they are, or at least they have man-made elements to them. But there are these places that they either are, well, they are liminal. Either they're made to be so, or they just kind of have an eerie vibe to them from the get-go. Like, again, what the perfect example is the Torii Gate in actual Japanese Shintoism. Um, the Torii Gate is this liminal boundary where, it's supposed to be, when you're on one side of it, you're in just the regular human world, but when you go past it, you're in the realm of the divine. You're in their territory. This is the realm of the kami and the yokai. You've transitioned into that space, and the Torii Gate is the point where that happens. And you get this in other, all over the world, all over the place. There are these special places where it's like you're suddenly in the realm of the spirits, or the gods, or whatever. And in the modern world, I think why people find liminal spaces so fascinating, in conjunction with the increasing fascination in this kind of conspiracy, paranormal, cryptid, UFO stuff that's also being fueled by the internet, um, is because they are they're such a sign of the times, and the development of this American Shinto really is, it is something, I feel, in my humble opinion, desperately trying to crawl its way out of nothing, out of nihilism. Because, again, the liminal spaces of old, these sacred liminal spaces of old, when you reach the Torii Gate, yeah, it's a Torii Gate, but it's in the middle of pristine nature. You know, when when you're at Mount Olympus, yeah, it's this liminal realm of the gods. This is where the human world and the realm of the gods meets. But it's a mountain.
Like old Irish folklore too, like just wandering in the woods. And oh, now you're in the fairy realm. And
Yeah, you stepped into a fairy circle, made of
yeah,
mushrooms in a circle, stuff like that. Odd, but natural. Like have a divine feeling, but they're natural. But you look at as I mentioned earlier, what are these weird spaces now? It's a mailbox in the middle of the desert. It's something man-made in nature, or it's something completely man-made that's been abandoned, as is pretty much always the case with liminal spaces, whether it's the TNT area in Point Pleasant or the remains of Ong's Hat, or a lot of people legend trip to Camp Hero, which is where in Montauk, New York, which is where the Montauk Project is said to have occurred. Again, completely man-made former military base that's just been abandoned and is left decrepit. And you see this in you see this archetype in liminal spaces. There are these empty places that are completely man-made almost all the time, or there's just a big man-made element to it, and they're all abandoned. They're all left. They're the ruinous remnants of industrial society. That's the backrooms image is I think a solid example. It's this empty office space. It's not. It has this otherworldly feeling, but it's not the same feeling you get when you're in the forest or on this mountain on a mountain. When you're at the Torii Gate. It's totally different vibes, even if it's the same kind of energy.
yeah, yeah. These places that where your brain will register it, where it's like there should be people or something here, but there isn't. But then it
It.
seems the brain fills in the gaps a little bit in a lot of these places, and it's just like, all right, there is something here. You'll
Yeah.
start, start seeing creatures or sightings of entities or whatever, things like that, and it's just like, that fills it. There's something here. It's not just completely abandoned, nothing,
Yeah.
like empty. It's like, there's inhabited by some mysterious thing.
It's almost like how I would describe it is that the liminal spaces of the old religions had this energy, but it was the vibe was different. It was a divine vibe. You were in some place special, alive with a kind of divine power. The liminal spaces of American Shinto are, they're damp, decrepit, falling apart. We're just empty. They're lifeless, and even if you feel there's something there, even though you feel there's more to it, it's not. I wouldn't call it a divine feeling. It's more of a haunting feeling. This place isn't the territory of some great powerful being. Well, it is, but it's great in the old sense, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
Um, it's the haunting ground of strange creatures that don't give a shit about us, or if not, are actively malicious toward us. It's almost as if it gives me the sense that, like, not only is the modern world just destroying material the material conditions, the material reality of the planet, but also the spiritual reality too.
Yeah,
Even the sacred, even like the otherworldly spiritual places of the world are becoming like decrepit and decayed. Um, I was actually just reminded of another thing that ties in really well with all of this. Have you ever heard of demolition elves?
I've heard the name, but It's been a while. It's been a while since I've heard about them.
So demolition elves are basically exactly what you think. They're little elf-like creatures that are sighted just before. Depending on who you ask, it's just disasters in general. But a lot of the time they get the name demolition elves because a lot of the sightings take place just before like old abandoned buildings are about to be demolished. Almost like the spirits of these liminal spaces, long since abandoned spaces of kind of modern industrial society. It's this last gasp of like some kind of spiritual residue in them, like going like, hey, don't do it. But of course, no one's gonna care about some weird little elf sighting. But those are things that have supposedly happened. So I think that's just interesting. Again, you have this specific type of creature that's a very modern kind of phenomena that is specifically tied to the demolition of liminal spaces. Honestly, kind of surprised no one has picked up on that and used it for some kind of backrooms ARG or something. But
Yeah.
anyway, the point being that you almost kind of gotta wonder if we're gonna start seeing more stories like that of the demolition elves. Like maybe you'll start hearing of, I don't know, parking lot pixies, or like
So yeah, no, I wouldn't doubt it. I'm sure we'll start getting. Yeah, I don't think it'd be too long before we start getting even more, as especially as a consequence of like the internet and like its effects, like like kind of like I don't know, isolating effects and just kind of like this weird societal shift the internet's brought on. It's going to like keep changing and getting more strange as it goes on, and especially one thing that's coming to mind too is like as our tech starts to blend with reality even more. So like who knows, down the line people are going to start having their you know a more advanced AR. People wear their silly Apple VR headsets around outside, and to see how things will progress in that direction too, because I'm sure we'll get like a whole new like genre of you know AR entities that people are running
mhm,
into.
you're gonna start getting stuff like what was the AI art cryptid?
Oh,
Fucking
Lobe.
Loeb. That's right,
Yes,
Loeb.
yes, yes.
Loeb.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be like some weird, yeah, some weird artifact, some weird like thing, some like persistent something that's just
People say they
there.
see that part where at that part. You're really getting into SMT is real territory. Watch episode 4 for that. But yeah, we're gonna get real cyber demons. Awesome. That's
Can't
so
wait.
cool.
You'll love to see it.
Wow. Yeah.
Which again, the whole concept of unfiction is going to become very. It's going to permeate like society and culture, like even unintentionally. Like it'll just be a side effect of our technology progressing to a point where
Well,
it's
yeah.
you know extending on the more literal sense of the word of cybernetics. It's 100% going to be like some strange artifact of that.
Well, yeah. I mean, and you're already basically seeing that. Where again, that's basically what the whole like post-truth kind of thing people talk about is. It's basically we're living in an era of unfiction. Everything is unfiction. You turn on the news, you're watching unfiction, basically. You know,
Yeah.
everything is completely unbelievable and unbelievable at the same time, depending on who you are. No one knows what's real and true anymore. It's definitely gonna get worse. It's definitely gonna get worse. So yeah, I mean, I completely agree. It's just, I mean, it's just you're seeing at that point. That's just like the the breakdown of reality. At that point, it's literally the Lane scenario of the wired and the real world being merged together, and
Yeah.
until there's no real. I mean, you're already seeing that. You could argue that basically already is true, but like at that point, it will 100% be the case. If people have like their brain machine interfaces, if they have their fucking Neuralinks or whatever the fuck installed, like yeah, at that point, reality just ceases to be. I think why the whole American Shinto development is so fascinating is because at the end of it all, despite all of this, it's this American Shinto. I would say it is a reaction to all of that. It's an attempt to find, like I said earlier, it's an attempt to find something within the nihilistic nothing of the modern, industrial world. It's an attempt to find, the spiritual in these decaying old, monoliths to consumption and, all this bad stuff, kind of associated with the Industrial Revolution. It's an attempt to still find the magic in it all somewhere, even in this post-enlightenment world, to still find spirits and monsters and something beyond us, and something that I think people, for a lot of people, this is a way to, you know as Nietzsche said, God is dead. Religion, traditional religion, traditional Western religion is just, yeah, everyone knows it's kind of going by the wayside, um for good or ill. And so this development of this American Shinto, as I really think, is this kind of this reaction to all of that. It's a way to build from this kind of spiritual post-apocalypse we've all been living in, and still try to find something more and higher and true. And you see that, you see that specifically in a way, the way people think about this, because yes, this is all kind of fueled by all this kind of post-truth, post-enlightenment, post-industrial kind of technological, like capitalistic schizophrenizing of society. But it's also, what is the main motto of this kind of stuff, of this American Shinto realm of belief? You think of Mulder in X-Files. The truth is out there. That's what it's all about. People want to find the truth. They want to know the truth about the Mothman. They want to know
Yes.
the truth about the aliens and the Men in Black. They want to find the what's real in that. They want to find something real in that. But I think, again, what a lot of these people don't realize is what they don't, because again, we're living in this state of affairs that's so materialistic, that's so, hyper rational. A lot of people think they, I genuinely think, far be it from me to say what people are thinking and believe, but I think a lot of these people, when they say, the truth is out there, they want to find the truth. They they think they want to find like documents confirming the existence of aliens, by the government. An alien spaceship crashed in Roswell in 1947, or that they have a fucking chupacabra in a cage somewhere in underground Dulce or whatever the fuck. I think what they really mean subconsciously when they say they want to find the truth, that the truth is out there, I think they mean, I genuinely believe they mean a higher truth, a
Yeah.
spiritual truth, something away from, all this man-made just distractions, this man-made illusions, this irreality of the internet and television, and as much as I love all this media myself personally, it is true. It's a distraction from what really matters, from what's really real, um, right in front of you in your everyday life, and also from you know something that's higher out there that's not real, maybe in a way that post enlightenment society would understand as real, but is real in a way that's not really detectable. And I think that's what increasingly people are starting to realize they mean when they say the truth is out there, you know.
Right. Yeah, and attaching to that, aside from that saying, the famous poster from X Files, the "I Want to Believe" poster,
That's bingo.
which
That's
is,
the other half of the coin.
yeah, the just the
That's what makes
desire,
it all click.
the like, like, give me something, like, give me like anything so I could, believe in this
Exactly.
higher
the
thing, whatever
the
it
truth is
is.
out there, and I want to believe. And those are the same. Those are, I think, in a way, X Files again. It's the pinnacle of all this paranormal conspiracy stuff that's really become a part of American culture. But I think those two phrases are really the two sides of the same coin that embody the kind of ethos of this American Shintoism. The truth is out there, and I want to believe because just what is there to believe in these days? Like, tell me,
Yeah,
genuinely, tell me
yeah, no,
what is there to believe in?
exactly. That's why people go looking.
That's why they go look. That's why exactly. Bingo. That's why they go looking. That's why they legend trip. That's why they go to these sacred American Shinto liminal spaces. Why they go to Point Pleasant. Why they go to Loveland, Ohio. Why they go to the Black Mailbox. Why they go to Area 51. Why they go to fucking Rhinelander, Wisconsin, or fucking Flatwoods, West Virginia, because the truth is out there and they want to believe. I think
Oh,
I think that's the perfect place to
yeah,
I think that was it.
yeah, no, that's, yep, perfect.
It all fucking got tied together perfectly in a little bow right there.
Well, there you have it. Was our, continuation on the American Shinto concept. Now, go out there, go do your legend tripping, find your
Yeah, yeah,
strange
yeah.
creatures.
Hell yeah, go out there.
That's the recommendation
Yes.
from this. That's what we
That's
take from it. Like, truth is out there. It is. Go find it.
exactly. The truth is out there. Go find it.
Make something out of this strange liminal world.
Yes, bingo, exactly. We here at Layer 1, at Schizopunk Media, if anyone can tell you, it's us. If you want to be a true Schizopunk, that's the most Schizopunk thing you could do right now. Go go to Bunnyman Hill, go to the Goatman Bridge, go to Lone Pine, California, just go.
Out anywhere, you'll find something. Maybe you'll find something new. Honestly, like, that could be the best thing to hope for. It's like, oh, you go see one of the ones everyone knows of. Oh, go find a new creature. Add it to the pantheon of.
You know what? Or you know what? The reason I wanted this episode to be on Ong's hat and not anything else like the Black Mailbox, um, is because sometimes finding something like this isn't a matter of finding it in a the way everyone understands the word finding. Sometimes it's a matter of finding it creatively. Sometimes it's a matter of what the schizos online would say being divinely inspired
Yes.
to make something up that's real.
Yes. Exactly. The knowledge will be beamed into your mind, and
So that's also very schizopunk, very Philip K. Dick. So yeah, this has been Layer One.
yes.
Hope you've enjoyed. We're gonna be trying to do episodes more often from here on out. Yeah, I'm you. I'm not a scheduling kind of guy, but maybe it would be a good idea for us to do a schedule.
Yeah, agreed.
But we'll talk that out amongst ourselves. But
Yes.
yeah,
All right.
peace.
Perfect. Take care, people.